I placed the envelope by Griffin's plate before I sat down. He didn't open it, just slid it beneath his napkin like it was nothing more than a receipt someone else would throw away later. That gesture, so casual, so dismissive, pressed hard against my chest. He didn't ask what it was, didn't wonder how much was inside, didn't pause to think of what it cost me to write it. He didn't even notice that morning. I'd wired them another $1,200, rent, daycare, groceries, whatever had fallen short this month. Na had sent the usual text, no words, only that pleading emoji and the Chase account number I knew too well. And like always, I sent it. No hesitation. No questions. That's what I did. Fill in the gaps, quietly. Invisibly. When Griffin raised his glass that evening, his voice was too bright, too certain. To Karina, he said, smiling across the table. The most generous woman we know. The air seemed to stall. For a second, the sound in the room dimmed. He didn't look at me. Not once. Na's face lit with approval. Karina lifted her glass as if she'd just been crowned. The silver bracelet around her wrist caught the light and my breath caught with it. I knew that bracelet. I had bought it for NA 3 years ago, a small opal set in delicate silver. She'd called it perfect, unwrapping it in my kitchen on Mother's Day. And now it sat, gleaming on Karina's wrist, as if it had always been hers. I smiled. A small, practiced smile. I buttered bread I didn't want and asked how the baby was. Na answered, but my mind spun elsewhere. Griffin's words kept echoing Karina. The most generous woman we know. He had said it in front of me, out loud. As if my sacrifices were nothing. As if groceries bought themselves. As if rent wrote its own check. As if the envelope hidden beneath his napkin hadn't been scraped from the last savings bond. I swore I'd never touch. I left early. Said I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie. At home. I didn't open another transfer. I opened my laptop. Pulled up the full history. Every wire. Every Zelle, every dollar. 2 years of sacrifice staring back at me in lines of numbers. I needed to see it spelled out because numbers don't lie. People do. I remembered the beginning. 2 years earlier, Na had sat at my kitchen table, voice soft as a whisper, eyes glossy but refusing to spill tears. Griffin would be embarrassed if he knew I came to you, she said. But we're behind. The baby was sick. We can't catch up. Without hesitation, I reached for my checkbook. She stopped me. We can't cash checks easily. Could you transfer it? I can give you our Chase info. From her purse, she pulled out a small folded slip of paper. Already written. Already waiting. That should have told me something, but I let it slide. She said it was their joint account. Why wouldn't I believe her? They were married. They had a baby. I'd been there when they promised vows. I had bought the stroller they wheeled home. I transferred $800 that same afternoon. She texted hearts. You saved us. That first time became the rhythm. Rent, tires, daycare, always through text. Always tender. Always grateful. I told myself it didn't matter if Griffin knew or not. What mattered was they were okay. But as I stared at the endless list on my screen, $800, $1,200, $1,000 month after month, year after year, no longer looked like help. It looked like disappearance. My friend Doy was the one who cracked it open. We were sitting on her porch, lukewarm coffee between us, squirrels tearing into the feeder. You're sure that account was joint, right? She asked, casual as anything. Both their names on it. I started to answer. Then I stopped. I wasn't sure. That night, I dug through my old cookbook, pulled out the folded slip. Just numbers. Routing. Account. No names. I searched the details online, and within minutes, the truth appeared. Account holder Nina Arboon, her name. Only hers. Not joint. Not shared. Just hers. $17,000 over 19 months. Straight into her pocket, I sat there frozen, the glow of the screen cold against my skin. She hadn't been desperate. She hadn't been surviving. She had been stealing, grooming me with soft words and gratitude. While I built her comfort with my silence, I started. Printing, transfers, texts, screenshots, proof. The folder thickened. Page after page spitting from the printer, humming into the quiet. If I couldn't trust my heart, I could trust numbers. They were my only truth now. Then the silence began. I had stopped the payments, deleted her account from my list. For days, my phone sat quiet. Then, right on schedule, it rang. Na's voice tight and sharp. "We're short on rent. Did something happen with the transfer?" I leaned back, watched a bird land outside my window. "No," I said, voice steady. "I just stopped sponsoring strangers." A beat of silence, then her brittle laugh. "I don't understand." "I think you do." She stumbled, said we'd talk later. I told her not to bother. An hour later, Griffin's text appeared. "What transfer?" I stared at it before typing 3 words. "Ask your wife." And in that instant, I knew. The surface had cracked. The lie could not stay buried. It would rise whether they were ready or not. I share this with you not just because it's my story, but because betrayal wears many faces. It whispers, smiles. It disguises itself as need. And when you finally see it for what it is, it can shake the ground you thought was solid. That's why I tell these truths on my channel. Shattered bonds, because sometimes the only way to survive a lie is to drag it into the light. But this is only the beginning. The silence was just the first cut. What followed was deeper, sharper, and impossible to unsee. Part 2 will reveal how the truth finally shattered, how my son stood in front of me, stripped of his illusions, and how I learned that forgiveness and forgetting are not the same. If you've ever doubted the ground beneath your feet, if you've ever wondered whether love can blind you to theft in plain sight, stay close to Shattered Bonds. Some stories you need to hear all the way to the end. Griffin's text had been the spark, but the fire came later. At first it was only silence, the kind of silence that doesn't simply sit in the room, but seeps into your bones. Days passed, the phone heavy in my hand, unanswered messages glowing against the screen. His voice echoed in memory instead of life. "What transfer?" Those words sat between us like an unlit match waiting for breath. I imagined him turning to Na, imagined the hesitation in his voice when he asked her where the money had gone. I imagined her shifting her eyes away. It's the same way she used to when she asked me for another small favor, pretending it cost her something to ask. But this time, she couldn't afford to look away. The match had been struck. The nights grew longer for me. I lay awake, not restless exactly, but watchful, as if waiting for something I'd known would come all along. Sometimes the phone would buzz at 1 in the morning, Griffin's name lighting the screen. I didn't answer. Let him sit in the darkness. Let him see what it feels like when silence belongs to someone else. By the 5th night, I could picture his house without even being there. Karina in the living room with the baby, her soft patience undisturbed by the storm. Griffin pacing the hallway. Na on the couch, her arms folded tight across her chest, her phone face down on the coffee table. And the air between them buzzing with the truth he couldn't ignore anymore. When he finally came to my door, there was no thunder of anger in his steps. He looked reduced. His shoulders rounded, his jaw slack, his hair a mess of hands raked through too many times. He wasn't the boy I had raised, not yet the man he was supposed to be. But something caught in between, someone realizing too late what he had chosen to believe. "I need to talk." He said. I let him in. The house felt too quiet, even as his presence stirred the air. He sat where he had sat as a child, cued at the kitchen table where coins had once clinked between his small fingers, where I had once patched his scraped knees with band-aids and kisses. Now his hands pressed together, knuckles white, his elbows carved into his thighs. She told me everything. His voice was flat, a kind of numbness, as if saying the words might keep him from breaking. He pulled out the papers. Not Manoa's. A marriage of documents, my meticulous printouts tangled with her account logs, lines highlighted, scribbles in the margins. He had done his homework at last. Double quotes, $20,000, he said. Of your money? He swallowed hard. She told me it was for us, rent, daycare, groceries. But it wasn't. Half went to her mother. Half to herself, his voice cracked on the last word. I didn't know. I let the silence stretch. Not cruelly. Not to punish. But because silence was the only mirror sharp enough to make him see, he rubbed at his face. I need to make this right. I nodded. Nothing more. It was enough to let him carry the weight. 2 nights later, I sent the message. No frills, no pleasantries. Nah, Griffin, my place. 6 o'clock? No excuses. The reply came quickly from him, not her. We'll be there. And they were. Right on time. Na stepped in first. Shoulders squared, her smile so thin it could slice her own lips. She wore jewelry I didn't recognize, the kind that glinted in the light like accusations. Griffin trailed behind, hands buried in his pockets. Eyes darting around the room as though expecting it to betray him. The table was cleared, the folder heavy at its center. I motioned. They sat dot one by one. I opened the folder, transfers wire after wire. Zell after zell. Each line marked with my sacrifice. Each lie wearing her name. Then the spending. Hotels, spas, handbags. And finally, the Venmo transfers to Corinna with hearts. And from your favorite girl. I slid the folder across. Griffin didn't touch it. Na's face drained pale, the way milk bleeds into coffee. Her lips parted. I raised my hand. No anger. Just an N. I have nothing else to explain, I said. My voice steady, quiet. No more to give. Then I turned my eyes to Griffin. If she's everything I'm not, then let her pay the next bill for a heartbeat. The world was so still, I could hear the clock ticking above the sink. Then they rose, left without a word. And in their wake, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. The months that followed were softer than I expected. The phone no longer clawed at me in the mornings. No more rent requests, no more daycare crises, no more just this once. I filled the space with something else. The food bank downtown, the shelves welcomed me. Cans clinking in order, boxes stacked with rhythm. People asked questions, smiled when I answered. Not once did anyone ask me to vanish. Help was help, honest and plain. But one Saturday, as the clock edged toward closing, I turned to find Griffin in the doorway. His shoulders bent, his eyes older, as if a whole year had passed in just those 3 months. He carried the folder, the same one that had sat between us that night. Only now it was swollen with his notes, his highlights, his words scrawled alongside mine. He placed it on the table. I'm sorry, he said, his voice tight. I never asked. I never thanked you. I let the silence stand. He needed to feel it fully. Then he reached into his jacket and slid a cashier's check across the table. The full amount. Every cent I had ever sent. Not guilt, he said quickly. I know it doesn't fix anything. But you should have it, and I should know what it cost. I looked at him, at the boy I had raised, the man still trying to emerge. And I nodded. The coffee pot at the back had gone stale, but I poured him a cup anyway. Set it in front of him. We drank in silence, because sometimes silence is the truest language between people who have forgotten how to speak. Later that night, the doors locked and dishes drying, I stood before my fridge. The old note was still there, brittle at the edges. I peeled it down and taped a new one in its place. 6 words pressed into paper. A mother can forgive but never forget. The truth is, survival is not love. Silence is not respect. And erasure is not the price of family. The bonds we call unbreakable. They splinter. They rot from within when fed with lies. But when they collapse, we do not have to vanish under the rubble. We can stand, we can see clearly. And we can choose not to sponsor strangers disguised as blood. That's why I tell this story. That's why I keep telling it. Because somewhere, someone else is staring at a drained bank account, convinced their sacrifice is invisible but necessary. And they need to know it isn't love to be erased. That's why I built Shattered Bonds. To give these stories shape. To burn them into light so no one has to carry them in silence anymore. If you've stayed with me this far, If you've heard every fracture, then you know what I know. Truth doesn't fix itself. You have to drag it into the open. You have to let it sting. Only then do you get to decide if you'll rebuild. This was my reckoning, but not my ending.